Hello, and welcome to the second episode of We Understood That Reference. If you've made it this far, we're probably starting to grow on you. I'm Claiborne.
And I'm Nikhil.
Today, I think it'll be fun to talk about casual MCU viewing. You and I go and watch these movies pretty much as soon as they come out, and we talk about the movies quite a bit afterwards. So we probably have a pretty good understanding of
Mhm.
them. But most people probably aren't comic book nerds showing up on opening night. Maybe they aren't marathoning the prior movies before going to watch the latest release.
What?
So it could be interesting to talk about what sort of are some of the pitfalls there if you're watching it like that,
Mhm.
maybe not so deeply involved, especially when there's like what, over 20 movies now?
Yeah, 23. It's a great way to spend a couple weekends.
It's a lot to watch, let alone keep in mind movie to movie. And really everyone goes and watches these movies, they make billions.
Right.
But not everybody can be super into it probably. A lot of them are just maybe casual moviegoers, especially,
Mhm.
a lot of these come out prime summer blockbuster times.
Right.
People are just out on a Friday night. They're thinking, hey, a superhero movie looks fun. Have we seen that one yet? Why not? Let's go watch it.
Right, exactly.
Hey, isn't that the guy from Thor? Yeah, this is Thor. They made another Thor.
Why after the first two?
Yeah, obviously the Avengers, I guess, are the ones leading the pack probably in terms of box office
Mhm.
and popularity. Everyone knows about the Avengers. Um, so people are probably just, I guess, skipping a lot of the single superhero movies.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, so there's a big variation in the box office returns for a lot of these movies. If you look at the Avengers movies, every single one of them has made over $1 billion. Um, and Avengers Endgame is the highest grossing movie of all time with close to $3 billion. But a lot of the other movies do an average of like 7 to 800 million dollar range. So there's definitely a big variation in the size of the audience for a lot of these movies. And you also have to consider that a lot of those dollars is coming from repeat viewers. So you'll have people like me and Claiborne who will go see these things a couple times. Um,
Yeah,
but
yeah, I didn't think about that.
and you can see like the popularity of the MCU has grown over the years because you had movies like Captain Marvel and Black Panther both break the $1 billion mark, whereas more popular characters like Iron Man, Captain America, they only crossed the $1 billion mark with their third movie.
So what do we call these movies that are the I guess like the non team up movies? Is there a term for them?
Solo movies.
Solo movies, not to be confused with Solo, a Star Wars story,
Right.
which itself I guess is a solo movie.
That's right. Oh yeah, wow. It's funny how that works.
Maybe that's where the name comes from, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So the solo movies, I guess that makes sense. They're, not as big, perhaps.
Mhm.
Although Black Panther seemed to be pretty huge, right?
Yeah, that was huge. It was the top 10. It was in the top 10 movies domestically of all time when it released.
So isn't that a bit strange though that like the Avengers, the team up movies
Mhm.
are huge. Everyone's watching them, and you have people going in there then that probably haven't seen the solo movies. They
Yeah.
don't know who Thor is. They don't know who Iron Man is. They don't
Mhm.
know the story behind, what is that Winter Soldier? What is he doing there? They don't know this stuff yet. These movies are still the ones that are getting the big draw, and I would think that it might. To me, it seems like it would be the other way around, where anyone can go watch Iron Man
Mhm.
and it'd be fine. But to me, it seems like you wouldn't want to watch the Avengers unless you know what's going on.
That's right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I also wonder about that because the consistently lowest performer in the MCU has been the Ant-Man movies, and a lot of the plot from there was kind of pulled into the last two Avengers movies, especially Endgame, where Ant Man was kind of a big character. His technology was kind of central to the plot, so you have a lot of people who never saw those movies.
Yeah,
um, the Ant Man movies averaged 500 and 600 $1 million, so it's about half of an average Marvel movie.
yeah. I think people kind of you know give Ant-Man a hard time. It seems like, and certainly Thor probably. But
Hmm.
which solo movies are probably the most skipped? The ones that people just don't bother with.
So the first Incredible Hulk is definitely the most skipped. Um,
That's one that people don't even remember it at all, that it even exists.
yeah, and I guess they don't have to. I mean, a lot of the plot really doesn't continue into any of the other movies. They established the leader as a villain at the end of the movie. They kind of teased one of those characters becoming the supervillain, the leader, but we never heard from him again.
So it's sort of like that movie was sort of maybe would have had more of an impact, but they changed directions later on.
Right. And I actually just rewatched it recently, and it's not bad. It's not a bad movie at all, but it's tonally completely different than the
Yeah,
rest of the MCU.
yeah, I remember it not feeling like the rest of the MCU,
Hmm.
and I always thought that, and I think in a way that's always maybe biased me against Hulk because of that. Like I always felt like he's almost too different because of that, the origin movie, I guess, or the the first movie
Oh
of
yeah.
him. And so now, obviously, like he fits in better, and he and Black Widow, like we talked about, have pretty good chemistry, and Mark Ruffalo works well with the team.
Hmm.
Certainly, Thor Ragnarok, I think, finally really cemented him for me, anyway.
That's right.
But I think he was all there in the beginning. It's just that I still had that kind of that older view of him in my mind, and so I think it was harder to make him fit in.
That's true. I think that if he did get a solo movie within the MCU, I think it would have been more similar to Ragnarok than anything else, just because that kind of had the Hulk and the MCU tone together for the first time.
Yeah, that one in a way seemed a bit more like a Hulk movie.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
which one? So other than the Hulk, which superheroes? I guess maybe not necessarily like the least popular, but I guess the people just aren't drawn to their movies for whatever reason.
So, so I had a friend who just recently binged all 23 of the Marvel movies, and she did skip a few, and the ones that she skipped were Incredible Hulk and both of the Spider-Man movies, and the reason was that they were not on the Disney Plus or Netflix streaming services, because so that's kind of like an interesting reason why someone would skip those,
Yeah,
because they're not easily available.
it's like a business reason,
Yeah.
some weird production rules.
Uh,
Uh,
yeah.
I kind of think, and so my wife and I we watch them, like she usually goes with us whenever they come out and we watch them, but sometimes she can't make it, and so you and I go and we watch one of the movies, and then she figures she'll catch up on it later, when it's out on DVD or something.
Uh,
And I think there's been several that she hasn't watched at all, and
oh
yet
no.
she still has gone and enjoys the Avengers and Endgame and all of that, no problem.
Mhm.
I think one of them, for instance, is Doctor Strange. I don't know if she's ever seen Doctor Strange.
Oh no, that's a good one. I like that movie a lot.
And yeah, and I was kind of thinking about that, and to me, it seems like the Doctor Strange one was a good movie, but it almost feels not really part of the MCU, because I guess that was sort of when they were introducing. I don't remember which phase it is, phase
Mhm.
two, phase three, something like that. There was definitely like a switch at Doctor Strange where it was like it's a we're setting up a new crop of heroes,
That's
and
true.
Doctor Strange is one of them, and he's sort of in a kind of leadership position, but not ready to take over yet because all the old guard is still there.
Mhm.
But you can tell like he's going to be important, and he's going to be kind of a senior member of the team once they move forward, and so that's why it sort of felt different. It was almost like it was someone else trying to make an Avengers movie. It was like a whole different. It was like a bizarro world, to borrow something from the DC, I guess, from DC. But
Yeah.
it almost felt like Bizarro Avengers, like he's Bizarro Tony Stark. He has the same, kind of the weird facial hair, the same kind of personality, not as charming or likable, I don't think, but
No,
the same kind of character more or less. Only instead of science, he's using like magic.
that's true. Who could be more likable than Robert Downey Jr. though?
Yeah.
I feel like the entire MCU was kind of built on the back of his charisma in a way. But you're right, there was a lot of parallels between the Doctor Strange movie and the Iron Man movie. I mean, Iron Man one. They were,
Hmm.
the storyline was kind of similar, um, and there were a lot of parallels between the two. But they're
Yeah.
pretty good.
Yeah, and I can't think of what other ones she might not have watched. We'll have to check our movie history, I guess, and see which one I had
Mhm.
not bought when we didn't buy 3 tickets for.
Oh
But
yeah, Thor.
I'm sure she's missed a few at least, and
Mhm.
but still, like hasn't really had an issue watching because I guess ultimately a lot of the stuff probably just kind of feels like Easter eggs more or less. Even a lot of like the side characters, like the guy from Doctor Strange, for instance, who's his sidekick guy, Wong or something.
Yeah, Wong.
Wong, yeah. So like when Wong shows up in a non Doctor Strange movie, it doesn't really matter who he is, right? It's like it you don't need to know who he is, and so just him showing up, it's not a big deal if you don't know. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff. Even I think the same is with Pepper Potts.
Mhm.
When she shows up and things, or there's a reference to her, it doesn't really matter because that whole thing matters within the Iron Man story.
Right.
Um, and then so like in game, obviously there's every single side character shows up literally in the funeral scene, just hanging out there. And
Right.
so probably throughout that was probably there's probably like at least 5 or 6 people who I don't think she probably would have known who they were,
Mhm.
but ultimately like they didn't matter too much for the overall kind of Avengers story.
That's true. Yeah, like that scene you just referenced, you still get the emotional impact even if you don't recognize every
Yeah,
character in there. Like they even
yeah,
had, remember in Iron Man 3, there was that kid that he worked with. So that
hmm,
kid was there, and he was like 5 years older, so he looked completely different. And
hmm,
uh, but like eagle-eyed fans would know who that guy was, and like casual fans would it wouldn't really matter to them that much. I think that's kind of the beauty of it. Like you can kind of walk in and still have an enjoyable experience, but if you've follow this thing from the beginning or binged it later on and are caught up, you get an exponentially more more rewarding experience.
yeah, yeah. And she hasn't really had any issue with the MCU. But it's strange because like Star Wars, on the other hand,
Mhm.
has been a tough one. Like I'm pretty sure she's seen every Star Wars movie, but she just doesn't care about them too much, and
Mhm.
probably didn't pay attention. And also it's been years. Um, so we go and watch the new ones as they're coming out, and there's a lot more questions of who's that? What is she? Why
Oh,
is she doing that? But with
uh,
like the Avengers, there really was none of that. So it seems like they've done a pretty good job, I think, of making all these movies pretty self-contained. So pretty
mhm.
self-contained. They work as like
Yeah,
a standalone movie. Do you
right.
think there are any that sort of fail as a standalone?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, I think Civil War maybe because I think you kind of need to really understand the characters
Yeah.
to really get the most out of Captain America: Civil War, because there's a lot going on there that was built up either within the first two Captain America movies or the Avengers movie with the relationship between Steve and Tony. That if you just walk in seeing
Hmm.
Civil War, you kind of it's kind of like walking into the second half of a play.
Yeah. What about the Dark World?
The Dark World, I think, is one of those that is probably the most skipped.
Yeah, but
I want.
do you think it works as a standalone? Like if you just even if you didn't even watch the first Thor,
Uh,
like if you went and just watched that one, to me it seems like that one might be kind of boring. Like obviously, like it's kind of dull anyway, I think. But if you
yeah.
didn't know who Thor was, you didn't have the origin story, you didn't know what was the point of all this,
Mhm.
and then you're just kind of watching that one. Do you think that the Thor movie succeeds as a standalone?
I think you're right that you'd be a little lost as to the character development because a lot happened in the first Thor. I think the first Thor, for what it was a pretty good movie. Um,
Mm.
but I think you're right. I have to go rewatch it. It's been a while since I've seen The Dark World. But I thought it was interesting that in Avengers Endgame, they kind of gave you a summary of The Dark World more than they did with any other movie, because even they know that that's probably
Yeah,
the least
they know
watched.
nobody remembers it.
Yeah, the most forgettable,
Yeah.
the least rewatched movie of the entire MCU.
Yeah, so I watched. I'm not a big fan of Harry Potter,
Mhm.
I had never really seen them
Yeah.
until recently, I guess.
Okay.
But the first one, the first time I watched a Harry Potter movie was actually like years before I watched all of them, and it was probably like the fifth or sixth. I don't know exactly which one it was, but my grandma and I we were in Mexico,
Mhm.
and we needed to kill some time. And so we were just like, well, we need to take. We were waiting for I don't know a bus or plane or whatever it was, and so we had some time to kill, and we just decided we'd go in and watch a movie. And there weren't that many movies to choose from that were showing at that time, and Harry Potter was one of them. And I thought, Harry Potter, I don't know, my grandma might like it, and I thought, we haven't seen all of them, but what do you need to know? It's a boy who's a wizard. They're in a school, whatever. How complicated could it be?
Right.
And this one that we watched, it was the most boring possible movie of all of them. Eventually, I watched all of them, back to back, and I think for the most part they kind of work as standalone movies, even though I don't really care for the franchise as a whole.
Mhm. Yeah.
But this one particular one that we happened to watch first was probably the worst one to pick. It was literally just kind of a bridge between two movies. Like
Mhm.
it started with basically, I know everyone was depressed and it was dark, and it was clearly like something had happened in the last movie that set everything up to basically you know utter despair,
Uh-huh.
and they're gonna need to fix that, I guess. And then the course of the movie is the sort of like leading up to that in a
Mhm.
way of like we need to fix it, but they're going off and they're preparing and doing all their things, and then it ends before anything actually happens. So like nothing really happens in the movie. It's just 2 hours of dark despair,
Oh,
and
no.
it was just so torturous to watch.
Uh-huh.
And I'm wondering if there'd be like some kind of equivalent in the MCU. And obviously
Mhm.
you'd think that you shouldn't go in and just watch one of these randomly, right? Like don't watch Thor 2 before watching Thor 1.
Uh-huh.
But I guess sometimes people do for whatever reason. Maybe they're waiting on a plane or whatever.
Uh-huh.
They do just watch one random movie.
Oh, yeah.
And some of them may not hold up as just a pure standalone. And I probably agree with Civil War. I remember, to be honest, like I don't know if I even needed Civil War in the MCU at all. Like I don't know if it really ultimately didn't do anything. It felt kind of cheap. But it was just like playing up drama,
Oh, really?
internal drama on the team. Like it was cool. I guess it was like kind of fan servicey. Like let's get everybody fighting each other. But at the end of the day, it's just like they all make peace and they all go fight Thanos ultimately. So like, what did it really matter? Like it was just sort of it felt almost kind of like a reality show. Trying to like engineer drama so that they can break up the team and have something while they're waiting for like an actual villain to come into play.
No way. I totally disagree. Like it kind of set up like that was the reason for them losing in Infinity War because they weren't like together. Like if they were a united front, they probably could have won against Thanos in
Nah,
Infinity
they
War.
couldn't. And he had all the gems. Like nobody's gonna, even if they were all together as a team, they're not gonna beat him.
Huh. Um, but I don't know. I love the relationship between Steve and Tony. I feel like that was like the heart of the MCU. But going back to what you were saying about Harry Potter, like I'm not that big of a fan either. I think like there's out of the big four like fandoms in movies and pop culture, it would be Marvel, DC, Harry Potter, and Star Wars. Um, like it's very difficult, I think, to be like a very engrossed fan in all of them because it's just it's like a demand
It's
on
too
so,
much.
yeah, it's too much exactly.
Well, is that going to happen though with the MCU? Is the MCU too much? It's already hard enough to keep track of, like what
Mhm.
nine Star Wars movies. There's I don't know 8 or 9 Harry Potters or whatever. You throw in the Twilight movies, why not? If you're going to be like watching all these different franchises,
Uh,
already that's not even as many movies as there are just in the MCU alone.
mhm.
So can you truly hold 23, eventually 30, maybe 40, who
Uh,
knows, 60, 100 movies, if it goes long enough?
well, I
Is it even possible to have 100 movies worth of knowledge in your head to the point that you can continue to watch these sequels as they churn them
Yeah,
out?
yeah, I think so. I mean, because it kind of goes in like bubbles and waves, Like you have the first like 23 that we got is kind of a concise story. that has
Mhm.
these threads that come out of it. So I think going forward, like if
Yeah,
you
so like Endgame sort of closes that chapter.
Mhm. Yeah, like the Iron Man, the Captain America, circles. So you can kind of skip, you know, 7, 9 movies.
So do you think in a way like everyone's going to be kind of a casual viewer at some point just because it's impossible to watch, all 100 movies that come out. So eventually you'll just be saying, like I'm the Infinity War era. I watched
Mhm.
that chapter. And then like from then on it's like some people, especially people growing up today coming of age to watch these movies and things like that, are they going to go back and watch 20 movies just to start, in whatever the next chapter is. If a lot of those movies don't really matter in terms of, obviously there's probably going to be Easter eggs and references and things like that, but ultimately, I guess you don't need to know who the founding members of the Avengers are to understand that, the Avengers are a group of superheroes that fight bad guys. Like that can happen every decade, and nobody, you don't have to, go back to the beginnings of it with Iron Man necessarily
Yeah.
in order to understand.
Well, I think that 2 things might draw them in. One is the quality. I think that, a lot of these movies are timeless and that you can, rewatch them 10 years down the line and they still maintain, their quality. The other thing is I think uh, the just the platforms on which we consume media has changed. Like 20 years ago, what you just described would be like a daunting task. But today, you just sign up for Disney Plus and everything's right there.
Hmm.
So I think
Yeah, you
that
just stream it like it's a TV show or something.
exactly. Yeah. So I think that the ease of accessibility is definitely um, made what you're describing much more possible. Um, and I think that the tone of these movies really makes them a lot more accessible too. Like you said, you walked into that Harry Potter movie and it was dark and depressing.
Hmm.
But I think that if you walked into a movie that was light and humorous and just like joyful, I think that it's a little easier to walk in and it's much more of an enjoyable experience. Um,
Yeah. So which movie out of the bunch do you think drew in the most like newcomers? People who, they hadn't watched the MCU yet, but uh, you know, Thor Ragnarok hits the screen and they like, they love it or whatever, and they decide, yeah, I got to go watch this. It was a great movie, and then they're going to go watch all the rest. Are there any like movies that you think really brought in a lot of newcomers?
Yeah, definitely. So I think the first wave was with the first Avengers movie. Like even if you just look at the box office, you can see like that one really broke through in a way that
Hmm.
one of the first 5 movies didn't.
Yeah, to me that seems like I don't know, like someone's grandpa hearing about these Iron Mans and Captain Americas, and it's like, who cares? This it's just a fad. And then when the Avengers comes along, they're like, huh, I guess these superhero things are working after all.
Yeah,
And then I might as well go watch it.
yeah, it was definitely like a pop culture moment. That was the moment these characters became household names. And then I think if you look at just look at like the box office, I think 2018, like with the double hitter of Black Panther and Infinity War, really elevated the MCU. I think the Black Panther was kind of like a cultural moment that really broke through. And then I think Infinity War was another, like the one-two punch really elevated the whole genre. Because if you look at like the box office starting in 2018 with Black Panther and with Infinity War, like the movies have consistently performed better in the last 2 years than they did prior to that. In
Yeah. So
27,
they were big anyway. The Avengers, kind of blew
yeah,
it up. And then Black Panther, Infinity War came in and just basically dominated. It said,
yeah.
everyone in the world needs to watch this stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Like the 3 releases that came out in 2017, which were Spider-Man: Homecoming, Thor: Ragnarok, and Guardians Volume 2, Guardians of the Galaxy
Hmm.
Volume 2. They all performed within the 700 range, $700 million range. And after Black Panther came out, like getting to $1 billion was the norm.
How do you feel about Guardians of the Galaxy? It's sort of like feels very much like its own separate story in a way, although it all came and connected. there at the end, but it's still in terms of like tone and everything. It feels very different from your standard Avengers story.
Oh, absolutely. I think personally, it's kind of my least favorite. I'm not that huge of a fan.
Oh yeah,
Like those are the ones that I like the second Guardians of the Galaxy. I only saw that movie once, which is very rare for me. um, but yeah, I'm not that huge of a fan. But I think that those movies actually brought in a lot of um, casual fans because I know a lot of people who aren't really into Captain America and Iron Man and like the superhero genre that love
yeah,
Guardians of the Galaxy, and we're kind of drawn into the final two Avengers movies because of that.
yeah, because it's more of a they're more sci-fi
Hmm.
than like superhero.
Right.
Yeah, so it's like it feels like it's a different genre really, but then ultimately, everything kind of comes together and works pretty well together, I thought. But maybe that might be the strength, I guess, of the MCU. I don't know that they've done that too much. Most of the other movies, I think, seem pretty straightforward MCU movies, and Guardians is the only one that's really out there. I think Thor Ragnarok kind of feels a bit different, but that's because of the director,
Hmm.
probably more than anything. Also, it's takes place in space, so it's a little more sci-fi than
Hmm.
usual. Um, but the rest of them, are fairly standard, like Thor and Captain America and Iron Man and even Black Panther. They all feel very grounded in the same kind of world.
That's right.
But
Yeah.
Guardian certainly stands out. I think Doctor Strange could, but it didn't really go in that direction. It seems like they took the Doctor Strange story, which could have been, a lot more uh, mystical, uh, magic fantasy,
Hmm.
and they sort of grounded it in the Avengers world very much so. So it feels almost like it's more of a Tony Stark ripoff than its own kind of thing. And I think it probably had the chance to be something more like Guardians of the Galaxy, where it is very much a different genre, its own feel to it. And maybe if they do stuff like that, they have a lot more kind of spin-offs in different areas than come under this big tentpole team up movie. Could be a good strategy for them for reaching different fan bases.
Oh yeah, that's right. But it kind of looks like they are going into the more Avengers direction. The sequel to Doctor Strange is called Doctor Strange the Madness of the Multiverse. So it's definitely going to lean heavily into Marvel lore and a lot of Easter eggs and a lot of references to the past 23 movies, maybe even Marvel movies beyond the MCU. So um,
Yeah.
it'll be interesting.
So what do you think would be the most confusing part so far in the MCU for someone who's a casual viewer?
I think anyone who watched Endgame as their first movie is going to be really confused.
Yeah. You'll say, who the heck are all these people?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess because like Endgame literally doesn't set anything up. There's nothing new.
Mhm.
It's all existing stuff. You have to know the whole story.
Right. You had to at least have watched Infinity War.
I don't know. Maybe not. Infinity War, all it did was just set stuff up with the snap, and then it starts in game 5 years later.
I guess that's true. I guess that's
So in
true.
a way, like if you just have the opening a little opening line about Thanos snapped half the population out of existence, and this is the state of the world now, and it's fine. But you're gonna be like, who the heck is this flying fire woman? What the hell is she doing?
Oh, right. Yeah, I know a lot of people who skipped Captain Marvel and didn't see Captain Marvel before they saw Endgame because
Yeah,
their releases were pretty close. Captain Marvel came out in March. Um, Endgame came out last weekend of April. So there wasn't that much time. People who didn't
yeah,
get to the theaters twice in 2 months, 3 months, um, a lot of them skipped Captain Marvel.
yeah. I think what would be really confusing would be all the colorful people and their relations, because even now I still kind of find it confusing. But Thanos is purple and his daughter is green,
Yeah,
but then his other daughter is like a blue robot.
that's
And I
true.
think if you were a casual viewer,
Uh-huh.
that would not make any sense to you. And all of that family drama as it plays out in whatever film you happen to be watching it in, but certainly in game had a lot of it.
Oh, that's
Um, you wouldn't know why. Why is this robot
true.
blue woman the purple guy's daughter?
Uh,
What's going on here? I think that would be a really confusing part.
yeah, you're right. You're right.
Also, too many Chris's, right? Like I can just imagine, like, if you're a casual viewer and you know these people not as Thor, you know them as, that's Chris Hemsworth, and then that one's Chris Evans, and then you're just like, oh, why's Chris got the hammer? I thought Chris was the one with the shield. It's like, and who's this new Chris?
Chris Pratt.
Isn't that Jurassic Park?
Yeah.
So, and then even you have Chris Pine to deal with now, who's in the DC
Oh, that's right.
movies. So yeah, a lot of Chris's. I think that could get confusing as well if you're not caught up on character names.
Hmm. And how many people do you think confuse DC movies with Marvel movies?
Oh yeah, that's a good thought. I could imagine, a lot of people thinking Captain Marvel, for instance, is Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
I think there's easy parallels there, I guess. I can also just imagine people watching, Endgame and being like, when is Superman going to show up?
Yeah.
Like, why doesn't he just, come and save the day?
Right.
Or, where is Wonder Woman?
Mhm.
Those kind of things. Like, I think people probably wouldn't expect Batman. I feel like Batman is enough of a kind of a franchise on his own
Oh, yeah,
that
right.
people don't associate him with anything in
Mhm.
particular. Like, they never expect him to be part of a team up movie, really.
Oh, that's true.
Um, at least casual viewers, obviously, like, super fans, they obviously know he's part of DC and the League of whatever. What is it called?
Mhm.
The Justice
Justice
League.
League?
Yeah, I was gonna say League of Legends for some reason. You know how Batman's part of League of Legends? Yeah, Justice
Uh,
League. I'm trying to forget that movie. But yeah, it would be interesting. I think it probably the reverse happens more though. I doubt people go into the MCU movie thinking, where's Aquaman? But I
uh,
imagine people watch Aquaman and wonder, like, how does this fit into Captain America?
oh, yeah. You're probably right. And Kevin Feige, the head of Marvel, he always says that whenever DC movies do well, it's good for him and it's good for like the genre in particular. Like what's the saying? Like high waters rises all
Yeah,
boats.
a rising tide lifts all boats.
Exactly. Yeah, because and the reason he says that is because casual moviegoers don't really make those kind of distinctions.
Yeah, so if they like Wonder Woman, then they're like, wow, this superhero stuff is really good. I can't wait for the next Ant Man.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
And especially the DC movies that have a lighter tone, like the Aquamans and the Wonder Womans, then those are more easily confused because they're kind of going after the same market. They're using that Marvel formula, so they're bright and colorful. So it's definitely a lot easier for people to get confused.
yeah. I think another thing that would probably be maybe confusing or at least off-putting would be the Infinity War, the ending, and just kind of the movie as a whole, probably. But uh, the way it ends
Hmm.
is, obviously a big downer, which is not what you expect going into a superhero movie. Like, I think that was even a surprise for fans going in
Right.
thinking like this. It wasn't so much a standalone movie. It was like part one of what would come on to be
Oh
Endgame.
yeah. Right.
So if you're just you're just out and you see what's showing and you're taking the kids out and here's a superhero movie, Infinity War, look, they're all
Mhm.
together fighting, this will be fun, and then to end on the note of murdering half of the universe.
Uh, you walk out, your kids are crying.
Yeah, yeah, I think that it maybe wouldn't be confusing, but it certainly would be strange. Like, you would not have that's not the ending that you would expect. And so I kind of think that that's a pretty interesting take on it
Mhm.
for casual viewers who, they went in and watching Infinity War and they were probably gut punched by that
Yeah.
ending more so than fans were.
Mhm. And I think that, like, breaking the formula is something that they do consistently. Like, anytime an idea, kind of feels stale or once it's been done, then they do something else, and I think that that's kind of one of the reasons it stayed fresh and new. You kinda had a couple movies, a couple Avengers movies where it was happy and light, and then they totally flipped it. Um, and same things with a lot of the other movies, you know, when you think like it's going one direction, they kind of just change it completely. Especially with the third entries in a lot of these movies, if you noticed, they're much different than what came before. So like other franchises like Harry Potter and Star Wars, they're having these spin-offs that are like really like inside baseball to you know, for some of these franchises um,
Mm,
like Rogue One and Solo, like they're not really part of the core story. And I feel like if you're not like a hardcore fan, you can get lost in them. And same thing with like Harry Potter. They had that Fantastic Beasts movie. I saw that.
yeah,
I didn't understand what was going on because I'm kind of like a casual fan. I've seen the
yeah.
movies, and then
I don't know. To me, Fantastic Beasts made a lot more sense to me than the whole Harry Potter stuff because
oh yeah,
with Harry Potter, what I never got was, if these are kids in school,
hmm
and then like this weird Voldemort guy is threatening to end the world or whatever, and then they're still going to class like and doing homework
yeah,
for I don't know 8 years, however many years it is,
uh-huh.
and it just seems really strange to me. It would be like Luke going off to destroy the Death Star, but then he's like, oh shoot, I can't do that tonight. I have a math test tomorrow.
Yeah.
Whereas like Fantastic Beasts having it be about adults set in like an adult world, it made more sense to me, at
Oh
least
yeah.
in that way.
Oh right.
Yeah, I understand what you mean about like I
Mhm.
didn't know what any of these beasts were, or I still don't really understand the whole magic stuff, all of how it works, and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why I just don't like Harry Potter in general.
Yeah, I think there are people who have read the books who just have a completely different liking of it than people who have just seen the movies.
Yeah,
So I've seen all the movies since they started coming out, but that's it. Like I'll see the movie, and then 2 years will go by, and I won't give it a second thought, and then I'll see the other movie, and I'll completely forget about what happened in the last one.
yeah.
And I don't think I really enjoyed them that much because I never really got it like into it. Um, and I was a casual fan, so I don't think that I really had the love for it that other people do.
Would the MCU ever have like purely standalone movies that are kind of spin-offs, have nothing to do with the Avengers, for instance?
Um, I kind of hope not because I think that part of the magic is the connectivity of all of them. So sometimes you go see a movie and you don't really feel like it's connected to the larger
So
story.
like let's say they got that Marvel somehow got the rights back to X-Men.
Mhm.
Then if they wanted to make an X-Men movie,
Uh-huh.
does it have to then be in the MCU, or would it be like a whole separate cinematic universe?
Well, I think that part of the appeal is that they're all connected, and I think part of the appeal is that it's they all live in the same world. So I think that they would want to put them in the same genre. I think that the question comes in if you have something completely different, like a Deadpool, which is kind of you know, um, going after a different demographic than like the family friendly MCU, um, then what do you do? Then do you want to see it in its own world or not? So but that's more of like a business question um,
Yeah.
than like a creative question.
So in terms of the overall story, then for the MCU, what movies do you think you could do without? Not like saying, we don't
Oh,
like this movie or this movie
yeah,
was dull or boring or whatever, but in terms of if you were to, you have someone who hasn't seen
yeah.
any of these yet,
Mhm.
and they're going to watch Infinity War and Endgame,
Okay,
but they don't have time to watch all, what is it, 23,
yeah,
23 movies or
right.
something.
Uh,
So they have to cut out a few. Which ones could they like just not do with and not miss out on too much in terms of story?
Great question. I think you could skip the Incredible Hulk. I think you can skip the Thor: The Dark World. I think you could miss both of the Ant-Man movies.
Oh, you're killing me. Both Ant-Mans?
Um, I really like the first one, so maybe see the first one. But I,
Yeah.
I, I honestly think the second one didn't really add anything at all.
And it added a wasp.
It did add a wasp, but like she really wasn't that big of a character um, in Endgame anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. I like Ant-Man, but I think it works too, sort of like Guardians of the Galaxy, where it feels kind of different. It feels like its own thing.
It does, yeah.
Ant-Man's obviously more connected, and I think they had a good way of working him into the whole Avengers plot there.
hmm
But I like how it's he's basically a criminal. His friends are criminals,
hmm
from prison and all this, and so it's just Paul Rudd is fun, hilarious guy anyway. So it's just a very different feeling from the rest. So it's nice. It's like kind of a breath of fresh air in a way. Um, I kind of think that maybe they should do more like that, and maybe they could have movies that take place within the MCU, but ultimately don't matter to the MCU,
Yeah.
if that makes any sense. Like just let Ant Man go be, his Ant Man superhero doing Ant Man things. He doesn't have to
Mhm.
be a member of the Avengers, or like do that with Spider Man, for instance. Like Spider Man
Yeah.
probably would have been a good one that they could have had as a standalone, but certainly they're gonna wrap him up into the Avengers.
Right.
And so he's going to be one of the main characters there. But there's no reason like he couldn't have you could have spent 4 or 5 movies with him just stopping crime in Forest Hills or something.
Yeah. I think a lot of those old like Netflix shows and the ABC shows kind of did that. They kind of lived in the world, but they didn't influence it.
Yeah,
And
yeah, and I wouldn't mind movies like that. Although yeah, the TV shows were pretty good, and I guess that's probably the business plan there is to just continue doing them as television shows
yeah.
and keep the movies for blockbuster movies
Mhm.
that are all connected.
I wonder what's going to happen with the Disney Plus series. Like, how much influence are they going to have on the movies? Because when we talk about like casual fans, are casual fans going to sit down and watch a 4 hour television series before they go to watch a
Yeah.
movie? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even keep up with Agents of Shield. I liked
Yeah.
it, and there were some odd moments in it, but it just got to be too much.
Right.
And that's what, an hour a week for years and years just to watch a 3-hour movie.
Right. I think the Disney Plus series are gonna be much less of a commitment. I think that they're gonna be 6 episodes each, and it's gonna be, like, 30 to 40 minutes. So it's not like, you walk in and you have to watch 22 episodes of a season before, um,
Yeah,
to understand something, but it's still, a whole 'nother type of commitment that you're asking fans to do. Like, fans like you and I will eat it up and be excited about it, but, casual fans, like the ones we're talking about, it'll be interesting to see what their reaction is,
yeah,
especially when it comes to movies like WandaVision, which is going to lead directly into Doctor Strange, 'cause, Scarlet Witch is like a side character in the Doctor Strange sequel. Her series will like build up into that, so that'll be pretty interesting.
yeah. I think it's kind of a catch-22 though, and that was the problem I think with Agents of Shield, where it's like I'm watching it because I'm a fan of the MCU,
Mhm,
but then
right,
because it's this spin-off television show, they can't actually really affect anything in the MCU.
mhm, right,
So then I'm watching this thing, and it's like it never seems to matter.
exactly,
And so then it's like, why am I investing all this time in this? And it's sort of like half of the time it wants to be its own story and say, we're doing our own thing, and these are new characters, and you got to care about these characters. But at the same time, it wants you to come in and care about these characters because you care about Thor and Captain America, but they don't have anything to do with each other.
right.
So it's that catch-22 of come in because you like the MCU, but don't worry if you miss it because it has nothing to do with the MCU.
Exactly. It's the B storyline. It's never gonna affect the A storyline. So
Yeah,
is it really important? Not really. And I think that that's why they're going to be continue like that's why all the movies going forward are going to affect each other or have some kind of everything is must see TV in a way.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I think like I think I mentioned before, in a way, we're all going to be casual viewers because it's just content overload. Um, we're lucky, I think, that we were the age we were when we are, so like we've been able to watch these as they've come out.
right. Yeah. From the
But
beginning.
people who are 15 years old today, maybe they watched Endgame,
Mhm.
um, but did they watch the 20 movies before that? Probably not.
That's right. Yeah.
And people who are going to be 15 in 10 years, whenever it's 40 movies now, they're not going to go and watch all 40 movies
Yeah.
that they've missed out on. It's not as easy as Star Wars, where like yeah, there's 3 movies that I had missed out because I
Right.
wasn't born yet. But for this, there's literally going to be 40 movies that you're going to have to go and watch that were before you were old enough to watch movies,
Mhm.
and just in order to go and enjoy the latest blockbuster.
Right.
So I think we're gonna have to at some point all just kind of be casual viewers, and I think hopefully they're breaking it up in a way where that kind of casual viewing is easy enough to do.
Mhm.
but still, giving enough, I guess, like Easter eggs or nods to things that the hardcore fans will appreciate it.
That's true, because I think in their minds, like the people who are making this, um, are in both hands. Like they want to create an easily accessible product. At the same time, they want to entice you enough to go back and watch those old movies and
Hmm.
become a committed, loyal fan who will go to the theaters 3 4 times a year to see these movies. You won't miss one, even if you're a big fan of superheroes and you're not that big a fan of Guardians, because it's part of the connected story, you're gonna go see it. And I think that's part of the business model and part of the reason why it's been so successful.
Makes sense.
It's hard. It is hard to be a fan of like all these um, genres. I think that like if you're a big Harry Potter fan, I think it's hard to be a Harry Potter fan and a Marvel fan and a Star Wars fan and get the maximum out of all of these just because there's so much content. You know,
Hmm.
yeah, you need time to do other things.
Yeah, so you're saying basically you can pick one and that's it.
Yeah, and I mean you'll see the other ones, but you can only be like a big fan of like one of them, maybe two.
Yeah.
And on the others, you are a casual viewer. Which ones do you think you're a hardcore fan versus a casual fan?
Um, I would probably think that I'm a casual fan of most things, but um, maybe Star Wars. I'm probably most familiar with Star Wars.
Okay.
But even then, like what when you see actual hardcore Star Wars fans, like I'm nowhere near that. Like they have encyclopedia knowledge about every little detail,
Oh yeah.
and I know a lot of things just because not only have I seen the movies, but I've played several of the video games,
Hmm.
and I think video games are a great way to like get you into the rest of the lore that you kind of wouldn't hear about otherwise.
Okay.
And the same is true with like my Marvel. I've never read the comics, but I've played some Marvel video games, and from that, I learn about other things
Okay.
through that. So I'm familiar with these different concepts, but I don't necessarily know all there is to know about them. But so I think probably the MCU and Star Wars are what I'm most familiar with.
Okay.
I would say next might be Twilight, and then like
Mhm.
Harry Potter way at the bottom.
Okay. Okay. Nice.
And Twilight, I can only say that all I know about Twilight is that the Wolverine or the not Wolverine the werewolf is named
Oh yeah,
Jacob,
that's right.
and then I think there's a vampire.
There is, yeah, several, I think. But it's interesting you mentioned comics because, especially in Marvel comics, there's this big history. But most people who are reading have read, the last like 2 or 3 years, maybe, or are just picking it up, and you are able to understand the story you're reading without having to go through 40 or 50 years of backstory. And I think that same
Mhm.
model has kind of been copied in movies.
Yeah, so in a way, their history with comic books and the long life that the comic book stories have had,
Mhm.
as well as just the sheer amount of content that they've created
Right,
over decades,
right.
has really prepared them for this MCU approach that they have,
Mhm.
and really knowing how to deal with managing that balance between hardcore fans and the more casual fans,
Right,
or maybe kind of most people probably fall somewhere in the middle where they're not completely casual where they don't know who Thor is when they walk into a movie, but maybe they just didn't care to watch some of the Thor movies,
right.
but they still are aware of him and know who he is,
Mhm.
and they follow along the rest of the Avengers and MCU stuff well enough.
Right. Yeah, true.
But I think ultimately everyone loves Ant Man, and that's the main takeaway. I think
I think so too. Yes.
is that casual viewers, hardcore viewers, you can't do without Ant Man.
Uh, in order to unlock the Quinjet, Ant-Man's password would be most popular Avenger. Did you understand that reference?
We understood that reference. Is that where the podcast name comes from?
Yes.
Well, I guess that's as good a place as any to end this episode on casual viewing. I'm not sure what we'll discuss next week, but who knows? Maybe we'll get away from the MCU for a bit.
Yeah, so stay tuned. More to come.
All right, thanks for listening.